Fine. Good afternoon, everyone. You're all very much welcome to this workshop on asset management code. On behalf of the CFA Society Nigeria, I welcome all of you to this workshop, and I can assure you that it's going to be a worthwhile time, an engaging time for you. Just before we start, I'd just like to take us through the protocols we'll be abiding by during this webinar. We are all connected using data or some form of internet, so I want you to be rest assured that even if there's a blip and you are disconnected, don't get discouraged, just reconnect back because we will be here. And if any one of us also happens to get disconnected, be rest assured that we will reconnect. So I don't want you to get agitated. And we will always give a little time for people to respond when we ask you to speak, because we also know that there could be a time lag. And the quality of your internet is likely going to affect how quickly we will be able to hear you or you will be able to hear us. So I want us to just realize there's technology, and we will try to make technology work as best as we can for ourselves, but we shouldn't get ruffled when it doesn't. Over 175 people registered for this webinar, so we are quite excited that everybody's interested in moving this market forward. My name is Shade Odunaya. I'm an ex-official board member of the CFA Society Nigeria, and I'm also the chair of the advocacy committee of the society. Our desire really is to see our market run a lot more, how do I call it, seamlessly. We are trying, one of the key areas that we have focused on as an advocacy committee in the Nigerian market is always in the issue of ethics and making sure that our mission is being carried out in the Nigerian financial market. And just to remind those of us that are CFA Society members, because not everybody on this call is, our mission as CFA Society is to lead the investment profession globally by promoting the highest standard of ethics, education, and professional excellence for the ultimate benefit of society. We believe strongly that when the market works for the ultimate benefit of society, everybody will benefit. And we believe strongly in ethics, and that's why we're here today. One of the key things that also is driving our choice of today and the topic is the fact that there was a survey that was carried out by the CFA Institute very early in the days of the global lockdown, in April to be precise. And the survey was aimed at getting the opinion of members of the Institute about how the economic crisis that have been induced by the coronavirus is impacting capital markets, investment management, and the authorities' response. And one of the questions in that survey asked specifically what the opinions of the members are in terms of will morals be stronger than greed in time of crisis? Will the current stressed conditions in the market lead to unethical behavior? And the survey result is actually quite interesting. Globally, we had 45% of global respondents saying that greed will be higher, morals will not hold out. And specifically for Africa, the risk is even higher because most of the African respondents said that 55% of them felt that morals will not hold and greed will be stronger. So it's a good thing that we're discussing asset management code today, because as asset managers, if the market does not trust you, if the market does not believe that you're going to manage their funds for the ultimate benefit of those who have invested, they are unlikely to be willing to engage you to manage that money. So I'm very happy that we're here today and that we're going to be talking about the asset manager code. And to take us through is Iain McAra of the CFA Institute, the EMEA Region. I'll introduce Iain in a few minutes, but let me just outline the way the whole thing will run. We're going to, I'm going to introduce the speaker, And then the speaker is going to take a session where he will be unveiling, slicing, and talking about how to implement the asset manager code. He's going to be interactive, he says, so he's going to be asking you questions and expecting you to respond through the chat box. So the chat box is open. You're free to type in your comments, your reactions. At specific times in the presentation, he will stop to look at what's in the chat box, and I'll help him read them out, and he will respond to it. So we have about an hour for that. Then we will then round up with a 10 minutes Q&A. Our goal at CFA Society Nigeria is actually to get more firms in Nigeria to become listed as CFA Institute Asset Manager Code compliant. There's a list on the CFA Institute website where those firms are listed once they become compliant and they notify the Institute. I understand that we currently have one firm, but the goal we have set for ourselves for 2020, regardless of the pandemic, is to see whether we can get at least 3 firms from Nigeria. Let's put Nigeria in the Hall of Fame as far as ethical conduct is concerned, as far as managing investors' funds in an ethical manner is concerned. So that's the way it will go. We'll take the 10 minutes Q&A at the end, but don't wait till the end before you post your questions, because we can take some questions as we go along. And then we will round up with an announcement of the upcoming events of the society, and we will give a vote of thanks. So that's the way it's going to run. So without much ado, I'd like you to get out your notepads, paper, or whatever else you need to take notes. Because I think it's important for you to take notes, because a lot of you on this call, you are actually compliance officers. So I would like you to note those areas where you're doing so well or you're not doing so well, or yeah, we don't have this or we have this, so that at the end of this session, you should be able to leave with a list of the things that are left to be done before you can claim compliance. I'm also hoping that you will set for yourself a goal. If you can't do it in 2020, when can you push management to be able to get it done? It'll be good for your firm. It's something you can publicize. You can tell your investors, your customers, that we are CFA Institute Asset Manager Code compliant. And that just speaks a lot about who you are, that you're applying global standards in what you're doing. So to take us today is the director focused on global industry standards at the EMEA office of the CFA Institute. His name is Iain McAra, and I'll just read a very brief bio so that you can place him properly. He joined the CFA Institute in April 2012 in New York and relocated to the London office in August 2013. Prior to joining CFA Institute, Iain had spent over 14 years as the Vice President in charge of US Performance Analysis Group for JP Morgan Asset Management. Then he was based in New York, where he also oversaw GIPS compliance. Originally from the UK, he worked as, I don't know, sorry, I got something missing here. But while he was in the UK, he worked at, what I'm saying is he worked as a volunteer. I'll just read it as I see it, I apologize. He worked as a volunteer with working with performance standards. He sat on and chaired various GIPS committees since 1992, including the US Investment Performance Committee, and later he was the chair of the Investment Manager Subcommittee and member of the GIPS Executive Committee. As a CFA staff, he has supported and continues to support the EMEA GIPS sponsors, investment manager and interpretation subcommittee, as well as the risk and investment reporting working groups. He was a member of the EIOPA, PRIIPS, KISS Consultative, and the cost and past performance expert groups, and works with other industry groups in the UK and the EU. Recently, he has been working on the GIPS Global Investment Performance Standards for fiduciary management providers to UK pension schemes, which has been mandated by the UK regulator. Iain is a graduate holder in chemistry from the University of London. Iain, we are so excited you're here today. I've been trying to get you to Nigeria for a while. So I'm welcome to Nigeria is the way I would put it, even if it is virtually. So Iain, over to you. You have the floor.
Thank you very much indeed, Sade. That's a great introduction. Just to put some context around GIPS, we see you spoke a lot about GIPS on my behalf. Within CFA Institute, we have many industry standards, and I am part of the Global Industry Standards Group. I specialized and have spent a lot of time on the global investment performance standards, but the asset management code is another one of these global industry standards that is part of the Global Industry Standards Group. So that is why Sade was mentioning my involvement with GIPS, as well as what I'm going to talk about for AMC. So now let me share my screen and bring up the presentation. And there we go.
Yes.
So I thank you very much indeed, CFA Society Nigeria, for giving me this opportunity to speak to you about a very, very important aspect of standards and ethical best practices. I joked with Sade, at least this gives me a chance to put on a decent shirt and a tie as appearing to you virtually. So I thank you for that as well. Without further ado, because we've got a lot of things to talk about, Sade's already told you roughly how we're going to work everything. We're scheduled for 90 minutes, including the Q&A. I will be posing some questions, and feel free to post questions to the chat box, and Sade will feed them to me during the presentation. There are a lot of online resources available that support the Asset Manager Code. Yes, it's great for you to make some notes, highlights. Don't feel though you have to write down, you won't be able to write down every single word that I put up on the screen. The deck that I'm working from today will be made available to you all after the presentation, so don't worry about chasing that. So what are the key objectives for this particular workshop? The first one is to raise awareness of the CFA Institute Asset Manager Code, which we call the Code, or AMC. As Sade said, you do have in Nigeria one firm that is already claiming compliance with this code, which is a terrific start. That ceiling has been broken, and we need more to look at that leader and want to follow that leader and practice best ethical practices in terms of the way firms behave towards their clients. Again, as Sade has said, without the clients, we don't have an industry. If we don't build trust between ourselves and those clients or prospective clients, we will not have the industry to support ourselves. If we build that trust, when the going gets tough, and it does, inevitably there are cycles. If the clients are trusting the people that they are partnering with in looking after their assets, you will collectively carry yourselves through the sticky patches. Whether we think of this COVID episode as a sticky patch or not, the stronger the trust, the more you're going to support each other as partners in the asset management industry. Now, certain things you can control, certain things you cannot control. The way you treat your investors is definitely something that the firm can control. And if you look after the things that you can control and reduce the risks associated with those things, you are helping to build trust and a long-term relationship. And that is absolutely key. So you can look to the Asset Management Code as something that will help you control risks and build trust. And that is going to help long-term the establishment of your firm and also build market integrity in general in Nigeria, which is something that you're looking to do. So how does the Asset Management Code actually help with that? Well, it's a principle-based concept. There are certain principles which are built in, which support how an asset manager should treat and should look after their clients. And it's a principles-based code, which means it's very flexible. It's not saying you must exactly do this, that, and the other. It's saying this is the concept which you need to be thinking about. You need to have policies and procedures that support those particular principles. You need to have documented those policies and procedures, and you need to be implementing them. And if you do that throughout the firm, so all the staff that are engaged with those particular behaviors, then you claim compliance with the code because you're supporting those ethical principles. So we're going to be looking at those principles and the behaviors that support those principles. We're going to be describing the value that the asset management code provides asset managers, the investors, and the industry as a whole. I've already touched on a few of those. Then finally, we're going to go through the resources that are available that support the implementation of AMC for a firm, and the guidance that is available and provided for firms to make this journey to enable you to claim compliance as smooth as possible. So those are our objectives. So let's get straight into it. There on the left-hand side, we actually have one side of the two-sided piece of paper that is the asset manager code. It is that simple. It is just two sides of a piece of paper. The code predominantly outlines ethical and professional responsibilities of firms that manage assets for clients. Very straightforward. It standardizes an asset manager's code of conduct, which enables clients to compare and contrast firms. Whilst you may well have your own set of policies that you follow, every firm, unless they are looking at some form of standard, is going to have their own set that they follow. And for clients to understand what each firm is doing, they probably have to go through all those different documents to work out whether every firm is acting in the same way, in the same behaviors across all the different aspects that could impact their treatment of their clients. This code standardizes the behaviors that should be followed, the principles associated with treating your clients and putting their requirements as the priority, putting the investors first. And this helps with that standardization. So then clients can compare one firm against another, and they can quickly identify those firms which are complying with common ethical principles. It doesn't tell them which firm to be selecting, but it says, here is the foundation that each of these firms is following. And now I know we have a level playing field for comparing firms against each other based on these particular ethical principles. So as of the end of September 2020, just how globally accepted is this? Well, we have over 1,100 firms across the globe that notify CFA Institute on an annual basis of their compliance with AMC. So it's definitely well entrenched around the world. Of that 1,100, 39 of the 100 largest asset managers globally are claiming compliance with the Asset Manager Code of Conduct. Now, regionally, in America, we have around 800 firms that are claiming compliance with this standard, 70 in Canada, 10 in Brazil, 6 in Uruguay. So it's not just developed markets, it's developing markets as well as developed markets. In EMEA, we have 120 domiciled firms, 50 in the UK, 25 in South Africa. Switzerland, France, Ireland, Germany all have around 5 to 7 each. So again, broad brush of compliance with this standard globally. In APAC, 70 firms in Australia, 10 in Singapore, Pakistan and India have at least 5 each. Now specifically in the African subcontinent, Mauritius, Namibia, as Sade said, 1 in your own Nigeria, and Zimbabwe, 1 in each. have been claiming compliance with the Asset Manager Code of Conduct. So it is spreading. It is becoming more known globally. Now in North America, 16 asset owners, so pension plan sponsors, published an open letter in the financial press expressing support for the CFA Institute Asset Manager Code. That therefore is the pressure, the asset owners saying that they like this code, they want to work with firms that are claiming compliance with this code. And if the asset owners want it, then the asset managers for sure need to be looking at it, understanding what it is, and seeing if they can actually change their behaviors to enable them to claim compliance with this standard. So there is pressure for the asset managers to be looking at this and adopting this. We're also seeing pressure coming from consultants, publishing RFPs where the question is asked, are you compliant with the Asset Manager Code of Conduct? Don't confuse that question with, are you compliant with the Global Investment Performance Standards? That is another ethical best practices standard, as we spoke about earlier. This is different standard. The Asset Management Code is another standard that firms can be claiming compliance with, and it is appearing in RFPs. Again, it is one standard that can be claimed compliance with across the globe. So a firm that is claiming compliance with AMC that is based in Nigeria is competing on exactly the same stage as one of those firms in the US, as one of those firms in the UK, as one of those firms in Switzerland, because you're claiming compliance with exactly the same standard. So a leveling there. In addition, a raising up of the standard that is associated with your national industry, your national asset management industry, adopting a voluntary standard which puts forward ethical best practices over and above what you have to do, what you are forced to do by the laws and regulations if you wish to stay in compliance with those. Here you are saying, you know what, we believe that we wish to promote ethical best practices, and we're voluntarily putting those up there as principles that we wish to follow. That is an excellent way for clients and prospective clients to really start to feel comfortable with working with a firm that is putting their requirements as a priority first, ethical best practices. So let's get into the types of principles, the principles that AMC is actually covering. 6 basic concepts that the principles follow. A firm, an asset management firm, must act in a professional and ethical manner at all times. You see, I mean, this is the principle, high level. Act in a professional and ethical manner at all times. Act for the benefit of clients. So that's putting investors first. Act with independence and objectivity. Act with skill, competence, and diligence. So, you know, be good at what you say you can do. Make sure you are. Be diligent. Communicate with the clients in a timely and accurate manner. Communication is key when you're trying to build trust. And then finally, and most importantly, uphold the applicable rules governing capital markets. You can't ignore the laws and regulations for the jurisdiction in which you operate. You have to be upholding those. And so it is key within AMC that those are also paramount in terms of their importance as well. So this is in additional to those laws and regulations that you must be complying with in the jurisdiction in which you operate. So if you look at those particular principles and then you look at the code is broken down into 6 sections. Those principles are reflected within those 6 sections all over the place. But those 6 sections of the code specifically speak to loyalty to clients, so the asset management code for firms expressing loyalty to clients, what the firm is doing in terms of investment process and actions, what they're doing with respect to trading, how they deal with the risk management, compliance and the necessary support of that, what they should do and what they are doing in terms of generation of performance and evaluation processes and procedures that they're following, and then what they need to disclose. So those are the 6 individual sections of the code. And here we have them in this next slide. They're on the left-hand side. And to give it a bit more depth, the code itself, don't forget, it's just 2 sides of a piece of paper. There are specific subsections for each of those initial 6 A to F sections. So referring to loyalty to clients, there is 3 specific subsections that need to be dealt with. In terms of investment process and actions, there is 6 sections there, and some of them have A's and B's within them. In terms of trading, there's 5 individual subsections. Risk management, compliance and support, 7. Performance and valuation, just 2. And then disclosures, 3, which are very straightforward, and 1 enormous one, which is subsection 4, which goes from letters A to letters L in terms of what must be disclosed. Quite a few disclosures. So 40 subsections within the 6 sections, all of which refer to these principles that we had on the very first slide. Okay, so 40 basic sections, subsections that could be looked at and need to be considered. Now, in more detail, we have that very code itself here. As you can see, the 3 subsections that refer to loyalty to clients. Managers must place client interests before their own, preserve the confidentiality of information, refuse to participate in any business relationship or accept any gift that would get in the way of independence, objectivity, or loyalty to clients. So we're getting more details there in those subsections. Now, the key thing is for the firm that is wishing to claim compliance with the Asset Manager Code, it needs to have in place policies and procedures that address all of these particular points that are being raised in the sections and subsections that relate to those principles. So you have to have in place policies and procedures that speak to these aspects, all 40 of them. It's not just, oh yeah, we do that, yeah, we do that. No, no, no. Policies and procedures that are implemented as well, documented and implemented. So there's the remainder of the code there, going up to section F, and as I mentioned earlier, the disclosures there, the 4th section there, A to L, in terms of all the different disclosures that need to be communicated to the clients. Now, we don't specifically say how often they need to be communicated or how they need to be communicated, but disclosures need to be made. This is, again, principles based. It's a code. It is not specific provisions. Nonetheless, we provide a significant amount of guidance to help firms really understand how they can take these principles and these specific sections and turn them into concepts within their policies and procedures. And that's where we're going to be getting to with the next slide. What we also want to think about is why, and Sade spoke to this, why should you bother to claim compliance with this? You're doing everything that's legal, one presumes. Why do you need to do anything else? Well, there's a difference between ethical versus legal. And to quote Aldo Leopold, who was an environmentalist, ethical behavior is doing the right thing when no one else is watching, even when doing the wrong thing is legal. So ethical behavior is doing the right thing when no one else is watching. If we are looking to build trust between ourselves, the asset management industry, and the investors, doing the right thing by them is absolutely key to doing that. And that is going to raise the profile of the industry and help us have an industry that will continue forward. And also, particularly at this time, and I've said it already once, helps us across the bumpy patches. There are always bumpy patches. There are always things that happen which we do not predict or cannot predict. If we can control the things that we are able to control and do it right and in the correct way, that is really going to help smooth out those bumpy patches. So why comply with the Asset Management Code? Well, it highlights to investors, both your existing ones and your potential ones, the importance of ethical behavior to you as the firm. You put this as a priority. It indicates also to investors that you, the firm, choose to adhere to a global standard that puts best practices first and safeguards the client's interests. That is key. They're the other side of this partnership. You, the manager, them, the client. You need them probably more than they need you. They can go somewhere else. Yeah? So you need them. And how are you going to convince them that you're the person to do business with? Treat them nice. It's pretty obvious. And the Asset Management Code is exactly the code to follow to engage them through that. AMC provides a framework through which the asset managers of all sizes and structures, because it is a code and it's principle-based, can provide services to investors that are fair and professional. We think of ourselves as a profession. One of the things that professionals do is behave ethically. And again, raising the profile of the industry. Why also comply with AMC? The AMC provides itself guidance on appropriate compliance procedures that support these ethical principles and the standards of the code. So the guidance that comes along with the actual code itself indicates to firms the very best way to go about ensuring these ethical principles are upheld. And again, raising the standard of the industry. Finally, all about raising the standard of the industry, it builds market integrity. And that enables growth, and that again builds through trust, the integrity of the market, and the market will persevere, which is what we need as well. So all ethical best practices will help to build that integrity and the perseverance of the market. So let's get into how you would comply with the AMC. Well, the first thing you've got to look at is you've got to learn what the AMC is. Yeah, I told you, 2 sides of a piece of paper. Not so difficult, 40 subsections in total. So look at those. See what they represent, see what they actually are. Then go further than that and look at the recommendations and the guidance that really get into what is going to be necessary to support those particular provisions, those ideas which are captured within those sections. Now don't forget, in order to claim compliance, you need to have in place policies and procedures that are implemented that indeed support those principles. So you're going to have to look at the policies and procedures that you've got and what it is within AMC that needs to be captured by those policies and procedures so that when you claim compliance, you truly are supporting those principles. Now we have some tools available to enable a cross-referencing of what it is the Asset Management Code is concerned about and whether you have currently in place the policies and procedures that speak to that. And we'll be getting into that a little bit further into the discussion. Once you've done that analysis, and that makes it sound very trivial, it's not, but once you have done that analysis, then you're going to have to look at the gaps. You're going to have to say, okay, we've got this, we've got this, we've got this, we're a bit light here, we haven't even looked at that. You've got to fill in the gaps, you've got to modify what you've got as is necessary to make sure that the all or nothing approach to claiming compliance is being supported. And once you've done that bit, you've then got to make sure that anything that was additional, that has been changed or has been fleshed out a bit more, truly has been socialized within the firm, because it is the firm that's claiming compliance, and all staff are going to be impacted by these new ways of behavior to ensure that the code is being supported. So socialize the new policies and procedures, make sure that everybody is aware of the behaviors they need to be supporting. Finally, in terms of implementation, in order to claim compliance, the CFA Institute itself must be notified that the firm is indeed claiming compliance with AMC. Once we have received that notification, then that claim is formalized. And indeed, the firms that are claiming compliance will be listed on our website so that it is available for everybody to see which firms are claiming compliance with this code. That claim has to be renewed on an annual basis. So clearly, in order to do that, there needs to be a review of the claim done at least annually. Are we still doing what we say we're doing? Have we changed some things? Have we changed some aspect of our business where we want to make sure that policy and procedures correctly reflect what we have changed there? So it needs to be updated and maintained on at least an annual basis to support that notification. One other thing that is key, the notification requires at least 2 representatives of the firm to have their details associated with that notification, one of which must be the representative that is responsible for compliance. So there you have a C-suite person that is putting their name against this notification that the firm is claiming compliance. It is a representation that the firm is supporting this way of behaving. And indeed, therefore, it should be supported by a senior representative of the firm. And the notification requires that the representative responsible for compliance is one of those signatories on that claim of compliance. So you've done that. You have to stay up to date because the industry changes, and to accommodate those changes, occasionally there will be additions to codes and standards that happen. So you stay up to date, and all information that relates to the Asset Management Code would be available and will be available through the CFA Institute website that is dedicated to the Asset Management Code. So not difficult to stay up to date, but you have to make sure that you do. So that's a sort of 5 steps onto how you would do sort of implementation of AMC within your organization. So how do we help you? You've seen the 2 sides of the piece of paper. Well, first and foremost, we have some recommendations and guidance. For every single one of those particular subsections, we provide some guidance as to what each of those subsections is referring to. And that there gives you a flavor of exactly what it is that you need to be looking at and ensuring that your policies and procedures talk to those particular sections in the way that section wishes to be addressed. Not satisfied with giving you one set of guidance, on the right-hand side, we also give you additional guidance. So that has been generated because questions that have come back from participants who have had issues or interpretation issues, and we gather those up and we generate additional guidance. Now, at this point, it would be really interesting. I won't pause necessarily, but I would really like to know for the participants who has actually looked at or considered complying with the Asset Manager Code of Conduct, and maybe Sade can just see what the number is. The other thing I would really like to know at this stage is, if you looked at it and you broke out into a hot sweat and you put it down to one side, what was the key issue that made you ignore it or say, okay, not today? Because what I would like to think is at the end of this presentation, we'll have less people who are thinking, oh, not now, and more who think, I need to go back to that. So I want to see who's looked at it, who's considered it, what stopped you moving ahead. And it might not be anything to do with the code itself. There may be other priorities. It's interesting to know what can be a higher priority than ethical best practices. But that would be interesting to see. And then at the end, we'll also consider, okay, of those who have looked at it, or those who haven't but now would like to, have the numbers changed? So that's my first question. If you just post your answers, and Sade could maybe help make a tally on that. So recommendations and guidance, and then additional guidance based on specifics that we have received back from the marketplace. In addition to those guidances, we also have additional resources. One is an implementation and assessment guide. This is a very high-level guide that introduces the code and also introduces the step-by-step process. So for each of those bubbles that we saw a couple of slides back, what sort of things you should be doing and looking at. That is a very relatively standard document, but it does help with getting management to feel comfortable with what the code is about and what it does for the firm if it's considering claiming compliance. Now, the big brother in all of this for the next resource is the sample policies and procedures. Here we're really getting into the meat of how you would look at the code and think about implementing it. This is a manual, 96 pages manual. Lovely thing. And it illustrates how the principles are actions, and it includes examples that conform with all the AMC subsections. Now, as I've said, your firm's policies and procedures must reflect all relevant laws and regulations, as well as whatever is necessary to support AMC. Further into our discussion, I'll be revealing more about this sample policies and procedures document. It is key to helping individual firms really understand how to embed AMC into their firm and reflect the fact that their firm is indeed supporting these ethical best practices. To help you do that, we have provided two separate types of cross-referencing mapping tools. There's a grid, which is an Excel-based tool, and then a chart, which is a Word document, so that the mapping of the AMC requirements against what you have within your firm currently, and therefore the gaps that are needed to fill out so that you can claim compliance, is very clear and very obvious to see. So everyone can see how they should work through it. Further to that, we have some sample forms, 5 different sample forms that can be used to collect information from employees to ensure that the ethical best practices are indeed being implemented correctly through the organization. Now, let me say with all of the sample policies and procedures and the sample forms, that is what they are, samples. This is not a set of forms that you must implement. No, no, no. These are samples which you should look at and say, okay, I see what they're getting at. Now I'm going to make the forms that are relevant to my firm. Or I see what the policies and procedures should be embracing. Now I will make those relevant to my firm, not only to my firm, but also to the jurisdiction within which I operate. So these are not formats that you must comply with. These are just to help you see how you should do it. But they do cover all the requirements within the AMC. And we'll get into a little more detail in a few minutes. Further to that, this is a picture of the actual implementation and assessment guide. So it has within it the asset manager code, the 2-page. It has step-by-step process. Again, how you should approach the idea of coming into compliance with AMC, what needs to be done, who is impacted, how you should carry it out, and why it should be done. The idea of developing, reviewing, and updating policies and procedures within the firm so that it can claim compliance, and also then to assess and validate the claim and ultimately send in the notification to CFA Institute. Very simple, straightforward implementation and assessment guide. So to the sample policies and procedures. The actual document itself contains 23 different sample policies, including a summary of how the AMC compliance program functions within the organization. Those 23 policies, and we'll see the details of those in a minute, cover everything that is relevant to AMC. So if you were a firm that was claiming compliance with AMC, you would have in place policies and procedures which would look something like, in aggregate, these 23, which would cover your claim of compliance with the Asset Manager Code. Now, you probably think that's a huge additional overhead that we've got to do. Why on earth would we be doing that? Don't think of it this way. Think of it that all you're doing is taking what you're currently doing it and putting it in line with a global standard, so that you can be compared with other firms that indeed are claiming compliance with the standard. It is not in addition to, it's instead of, and it's following a standardized process. Okay, so you would take what you have, you would look at it with AMC in mind, you would say, for some instances, fine, that policy and procedure is exactly what AMC requires. You would say, okay, that's nearly right, but I've got a gap here, or I need a tweak there, or I need to enhance what we've written about that. And slowly, by going through all the policies and procedures that you've got, you would end up saying, yes, I can claim compliance with AMC. You would use those policies and procedures in your risk management. You would use those in your business recovery. You would use those for business continuity. You would use those in internal audit. You would use those throughout the organization, not just to claim compliance with AMC. So don't think of this as an exercise just to be able to tick the box. This puts some standardization, some control, some true foundation around the policies and procedures that you implement in your firm, that are concerned with the way that you interact and treat your clients, a key part of your business. So 23 policies in this particular summary. There's an illustration in all of those of how the principles that are actioned interact with those policies and procedures and conform with the AMC requirements. As I've said before as well, because this is a global standard, it's up to the firm to make sure that the laws and regulations that they must comply with are also reflected in those policies and procedures. The guidance that we provide has no mention of specific jurisdictions, so that is up to the firm to make sure that they include those. So in terms of those 23 sort of generic policies and procedures, this is what we believe would typically be the policies and procedures that a firm would be looking at in order to ensure that they had covered the waterfront of what it is that AMC is concerned about. First, how you use the compliance program of AMC. That's just an introduction to how this claim of compliance is being used. You may typically find you've got a compliance officer policy, what the compliance officer is doing and how they are operating to ensure that compliance is being maintained correctly. Then policies concerning client disclosures. Don't forget, we mentioned communication. We mentioned putting the interests of clients first. So what is it that you are disclosing to clients? What are your policies around that? So that's a key policy that you would have. Jurisdictional licensing and registration policy obviously differs depending where the firm is, but that's going to be a key policy. It's, as you saw, number 6 in terms of what has to be ensured by a firm that they are following all the laws and regulations that they must be following. Then another set of policies and procedures, compliance with client investment restrictions and consistency with investment objectives. Obviously ensuring that that is in place, that the policies and procedures are in place, is key to ensuring that the client is actually receiving the investment advice and the investment treatment that they thought they were signing up to. What are the policies and procedures around that? What are your policies and procedures around proprietary trading? Okay, putting clients' interests first over and above what might be being done in terms of proprietary trading. That needs to be considered. Now, if there is no proprietary trading, it's perfectly fair to say, with respect to the aspects that AMC might be talking to about proprietary trading, it is currently not part of our business to undertake proprietary trading. That's fine. Should the business then decide to change and indeed start to include proprietary trading, then you would need a policy and procedure to speak to that so that clients understand what it is you're doing to put their interests first. Asset management agreement policy, something that typically occurs, and that again relates to the treatment of the clients. What about your policies and procedures as respect to insider information? How you deal with that? That's going to be key as well. Privacy policies, always on the rise nowadays. What have you got in terms of business continuity plan so that should untold risks occur, the clients are not left hanging? They need to know that. This is all about making sure the clients feel secure, that there is trust. What is the advertising policy that you're maintaining? What do you do about client complaints? Again, these are just ideas of the types of policies and procedures that you would have in place, which would include the concepts that the Asset Management Code deals with. You may not have 23, you may have more, less, but the contents, the ideas that are covered in these 23 summaried ones is really what is necessary to address what AMC is requiring you as a firm to be considering. What do you do about custody and safeguarding of clients' assets? What is your valuation policy? That comes into the whole idea of we had about performance reporting and communication with clients on a regular basis. Valuation policy is key on that. What do you do about trade allocation and aggregation policy? Making sure that there is no biases in terms of trade allocation. What do you do for proxy voting? What is the policy around that? Again, ensuring that the client's wishes are being expressed. Best execution, treatment of soft dollar, the use of soft dollar and brokerage, ensuring that either the policies you have for ensuring a best execution or indeed making sure that where the client specifies particular brokerage, that those are in place and you know what you're doing with those. Again, you can see how looking at these and ensuring they're in place for AMC is also going to be equivalent to just helping your firm making sure these policies and procedures are in place and being used anyway. So it's not in addition, it's as well as. Trade error correction, what you do about that, and the adjustment policies and procedures, should there be the need to correct trade errors. What indeed you look at in terms of the asset manager code of ethics. What is your policy around that? What's your policy for gifts and entertainment? Cash solicitation as well. Finally, record keeping, retention of records. What are the policies? Ensuring that indeed they are being implemented correctly so that when records need to be accessed, they are there and they are available to be accessed. And anti-money laundering. So across those 23 different summary policies and procedures, everything that AMC speaks to within not only the 2-pager, but also the further guidance will be captured. So this is a way for you to start thinking, okay, what of these have we got? Are we 75% done? Are we 90% done? Let's have a look at that. So if you're looking at those, within each sample policy, and I've just here selected proprietary trading as one of the examples, which is the 6th one in the booklet. Each sample contains requirements, the actual policy, and the procedures. So if you're thinking, okay, how am I going to write this particular policy and procedure that addresses this particular aspect of AMC? This may help in these sample policies and procedures. So specifically here, the requirements are stated as to the extent that the code insists that client interests come first, it would of necessity govern principal transactions, securities, or other transactions in which the asset manager has a proprietary interest. Both principal, then a lot more writing, both principal and riskless principal trades may be subject to regulation in our jurisdiction. At this point in the sample policies and procedures, it would say to you as the firm, you should insert at this point the jurisdiction, the regulation or the law that applies to you, so that not only are you addressing AMC, but also the laws and regulations that you have to follow for your jurisdiction. If indeed your firm manages proprietary funds, insert the governance information that appertains to that at this point. So these are going to be full policies and procedures that you are following, totally holistic. So then once you've got, you know what the requirements are for this particular policy, then the policy that you're actually following. Now, if you have a policy regarding proprietary trading, then that's terrific. Or, again, the sample says if you don't engage in it, then there is some suggested language that you might consider putting into your policies and procedures or modifying according to what you do. So for each of these 23 different sample policies and procedures, you've got to make it your own. You've got to look at it and say, okay, this is what we do. Great that we've got the sample from which we can base what we're going to write that's relevant to our firm. You do not take the sample and say, okay, that's it. No, it's to guide you as to what should be in your own particular policies and procedures. Procedures themselves would obviously be what it is that is physically being done in order to ensure that the policy is being carried out. So that's really down to the implementation and ensuring that whatever has been written actually occurs. So this is just one example of what is in a particular sample policy, but in every single one there are the requirements that it's trying to address, the policy itself, and the procedures that support that policy. So a lot of very good information that you can look at and use in order to make sure that you have the correct documentation to support your claim of compliance with AMC. So I'm now going to move back to the asset manager code itself and look at one of those subsections. You remember we had 40 subsections that we were talking about. This is one of them. In the first section, which is called loyalty to compliance, one of the subsections is that the firm must place client interests before their own. And then the guidance around that particular statement that is in the asset manager code, as you can see from the slide, I have reproduced it exactly, sort of indicates to you as you're reading this, what aspects of your policies and procedures you should be thinking about. For instance, it says client interests are paramount. Managers should institute policies and procedures. Well, there's a giveaway. The AMC is looking for policies and procedures to ensure that client interests supersede manager interests in all aspects of the manager-client relationship. And then it lists certain aspects that you should specifically be addressing in those policies and procedures: investment selection, transactions, monitoring, custody. Then it says managers should take reasonable steps to avoid situations in which the manager's interests and the client interests conflict. So that is making sure that conflicted interests are addressed in policies and procedures in terms of how you treat them and how you try to avoid them, okay? Managers should also be instituting operational safeguards to protect client interests. So that's implying, okay, there needs to be some discussion about that in the policies and procedures. managers should implement compensation arrangements. Okay, what would those be? Policies and procedures. Again, all this relates to placing client interests before their own. So you can see how we are taking these individual sections of the asset manager code and looking at their implementation through the policies and procedures that you would have in place. Managers should avoid incentives that could result in them taking action in conflict with client interests. You saw earlier that I referred to that as well in some of the policies, the sample policies that are being referred to. So here what we have is the individual guidance sections within the asset management code and indicating to you how you should be reading that information and thinking about how your policies and procedures take each individual piece of this guidance and address it. Okay, so that's how we can take the code and think about how the P&P relates to it. So now let's get to these cross-reference charts that I was talking about earlier. There are two types of cross-reference charts. One is a grid and one is a chart. And this is an example of the chart. So exactly the subsection that we were talking about on the previous slide, placing clients' interests before their own. This particular cross-reference would take all those individual concepts which are included in that guidance paragraph that we just read through and say, okay, internally, which of our policies and procedures addresses each of those issues? Now, in the chart that is provided, that is filled out in this mapping tool, it actually looks at the sample policy and procedures and says, okay, which of these sample policies and procedures relates to this particular subsection of the AMC? And you can see in this particular instance with the places clients' interests before their own, there are a number of different sample policies and procedures that relate to that. When it says chapter, it means a different sample policy and procedure. So number 3, number 5, number 6, number 7, each of them have different aspects of policies which relate to placing clients' interests before the firms. And this is a way of mapping all of the policies and procedures that you have got to the requirements of ANC. It also gives you opportunity to put into the chart any other documents that might be relevant, not necessarily policy and procedure documents, but general documents. And in this case, the one that is mentioned is the client disclosure document. Okay. And then finally, any comments that you would want to do as you're working through this mapping process. So you would take the cross-reference mapping tool, take all your existing policy and procedure documents and just make sure you note for each document which bit of that document or the name of the whole document that specifically relates to placing client interests before your own. You could also look at this document and the sample policies and procedures and say, okay, for this particular AMC subsection A1, of all these sample policies and procedures, which bits of it relate to that? And then you could look at the sample policies and procedures and say, okay, do we have that? Yes, 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 no, there's a gap, yes, yes, yes. So there's different ways of using these to enable you to take either what you've got, if you've got them all laid out, or by looking at the samples and equating those to what you've got, to the AMC requirements, okay? So that's just one of the examples there. So that's the first type of cross-referencing, very detailed. The second type of cross-referencing is somewhat more simple and visually very easy to see what's going on. And what you have here is across the top, horizontally, all the sample policies and procedure documents labeled, 1 to 23. And then down the left-hand side, each of the individual sections and subsections. I know it says AMC principles, it's actually sections and subsections. A1 is the one we've just been talking about. And as you can see, relating to subsection A1, the individual sample policies and procedures that have in them information that relates to that particular aspect of the Asset Manager Code is all highlighted. Quite a number of different policies and procedures have aspects that relate to that code. Now, one of the ways to indicate to anybody that was to ask, how do your policies and procedures support your claim of compliance with AMC, would be actually to show them the grid. You could say, if you look at these particular policies and procedures with respect to this aspect of the Asset Manager Code and ethical best practices, you can see this is how we support them through our firm. But it's also a checklist, clearly where you have any horizontal row that doesn't have a check mark in it, you've got a gap. So you could be filling this out, having read each of the policies and procedures and saying, okay, yep, that refers to that particular AMC requirement, that refers to that particular AMC requirement, end up looking at the grid and saying, okay, is there any line on this particular grid which is empty? If so, that means you have to address that. So that's a great way of taking what you've got, comparing it to AMC, and seeing where the gaps are. The two cross-referencing concepts do the same job, but one is much more visual than the other, and maybe you want to do in terms of presenting to people that want to understand how you support your claim of compliance, maybe the grid is the way to go. All of these cross-referencing tools are available from our website. You don't have to generate them yourselves. So we'll get into that. Another supporting item that we generate is these sample forms. As I said at the beginning, we've come up with what we think are typically 5 sample forms that would help a firm maintain its claim of compliance with the Asset Manager Code. You may need all of them, you may need more than this, you may not need any of them. They're just sample forms, typical concepts of what is going on within an industry, within the firm, what needs to be monitored in order to ensure that the policies and procedures that you are saying are in place and are being implemented are indeed being done. So you have things like transaction forms to make sure that any personal trading that is going on with staff is being logged correctly. Now, firms maybe already have these, and these are only samples and ideas. This is not, you must do this. It's just giving you some ideas to follow through, how you could collect the necessary information and help you maintain your claim of compliance. And we have, as I say, identified the typical 5 different areas that we think would help firms the most. So those are all the resources that we have available to firms that are looking at this. And what I've done on this page is just collect from the presentation the different documents that I've referred to as I've walked through the presentation, and the website address where you can find those particular documents. You've got the Asset Manager Code, the 2-sided piece of paper. You've got the recommendations and the guidance. So that's that slightly bigger paragraph, which we read through. You've got additional guidance to help with interpretation of those paragraphs. You've got the implementation and assessment guide, the 5 little bulbs: analyze, implement, stay up to date. That's the implementation and assessment guide. And also there are documents within that that will help you talk to the C-suite people within the organization and really help impress upon them how this can help the organization hold itself out to the marketplace as pursuing and supporting ethical best practices. You've then got the sample policies and procedures. You've got the cross-references, both the chart and the grid, and then finally the sample forms. So all those resources available through our website and the addresses that you will need there. So with that, I will go back. I've only asked you one question so far. I apologize for that. Now the second question is, do any of you that felt unsupported when you first read about AMC and were thinking about it, but just thought, I can't get my head around this, after we've been through this presentation, do you feel that there is better support, that is more likely that you will look at this again, knowing that implementation of it is supported by documentation and information that would help you work your way through it? Finally, another question: do you candidly see the value of such a standard in your industry, in your national asset management industry? So there are some things for you to think about and post your responses, and hopefully Sade will be able to work through those and give us some feedback on that. So with that, I will now turn it over to questions for our last 15 to 20 minutes of the time that we have. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I was muted. I was asking you to please repeat the questions so that people can have them again. The 3 questions you raised just now.
Okay, the first one is, following the presentation, are those that have thought about the asset manager code in the past and put it to one side more likely to go back and look at it again because they feel that there are resources that can support them as they work through the implementation? The second one is, I would be really interested to know whether participants see the value of such a standard for the asset management industry in Nigeria.
Okay.
The third one I've forgotten completely. I think it was wrapped up in the first one.
No, it's okay. I've got the 2, so I'm just going to, I've typed them into the chat box so people can reflect over it. You can continue
Okay.
now.
So have we had any questions that have come in from attendees?
There have been no questions, and there was only one person that reacted to the first question you raised, and the person's response was basically that they haven't looked at the asset manager code at all. But after today, we'll begin the journey to become AMC compliant. That's what I have from Blessing.
That's wonderful. That's terrific to hear.
Yeah. Okay, so you can go on. If you, let me see, there's some messages that's coming now. Okay, they're all just saying thank you for the presentation. So you can go on, not answers to questions.
Okay.
Okay, there is a question here. It says you mentioned not to mistake or was confused the AMC with the GIPS standard. I am aware that the GIPS also address broad ethical principles and behaviors for members of the investment community. I am curious if there's a major difference between these 2 standards. Can I adopt the standards independently without complexity to the ethical investment principles?
Okay, yes, thank you. GIPS and AMC are completely separate. okay? What they have in common is that they both put forward ethical best practices. But GIPS is all about how you present, how you measure and present performance information to prospective clients. That is the area that it is concerned with. It is also a standard. It is not just a code. It is very much based on specific provisions that must be followed. AMC is about the ethical treatment of clients, how an asset management firm should behave in treating its clients and putting its clients' interests first. You can see one is about performance presentation standards, one is about treatment of clients. Very, very separate, okay? You can claim compliance for both, ideally, or you could claim compliance for either. That's fine. You will notice within AMC, one of the sections within AMC addresses performance and valuation. Section E, there is a recommendation that for an asset management firm to ideally undertake the performance and valuation requirements of AMC, that claiming compliance with GIPS and indeed being able to claim compliance with GIPS would indeed satisfy the requirements of that particular section of AMC. But there is no requirement that a firm that claims compliance with AMC must claim compliance with GIPS. They are two separate ethical best practices standards. So one would not contradict or get in the way of the other. We would love to have all firms claiming compliance with both. And a number of firms do around the world.
But I bet it's good to mention the fact that where the provisions cover the same area, there's absolutely no conflict between the requirement of the AMC and that of GIPS, even though the focus is different.
Absolutely. And the other thing we should also mention is, if there is a conflict between what is in the standards, either of those standards, and what is required by laws or regulations, the laws and regulations have priority, okay?
Yeah.
Within the GIPS standards, you disclose where that conflict exists. And by disclosing what that conflict is, you still are able to stay in compliance with the standard, as well as following the laws and regulations, which you have to do anyway.
Okay, I've got a question here, which I bet you've answered already. Is the GIPS and Asset Manager Code the same? You've already answered that. Then there's another question that says that was asking, is there any financial cost associated with claiming compliance to the AMC?
In terms of third-party cost, i.e. money from within the firm going out to a third party, absolutely not. Clearly, there's a resource cost initially in ensuring that what you have in place in terms of the policies and procedures and looking at them, maintaining the grid, ensuring you stay up to date, that's a resource cost. But again, if you look at the leverage of the input you've put into maintaining compliance with the standard and how that can be leveraged across the firm, and also how it reduces reputational risk, because you are holding yourself out as following these ethical best practices. You've got policies and procedures in place that you are implementing, so therefore reducing any conflicts that may be coming up because you haven't thought about these different areas and you didn't have in place the policies and procedures before. So in terms of helping you with the risk management, whilst there is an internal cost resourcing it, I believe that cost more than pays for itself in terms of the additional controls that are put in place and the heightened awareness of your clients and prospective clients of the ethical behaviors that you support as a firm. It builds the trust, it builds longevity of relationships between you and your clients. because they can see how you wish to operate as a firm.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Iain, for that clarity. I think this person must have joined late. He says, how many firms have adopted the AMC globally? Because I know you started with that.
Yep.
And can you share with us information on multinational investment management firms that have adopted the AMC? Those who have adopted the AMC, you can go to the CFA Institute website and actually check the list yourself.
Yes.
So, because they are listed on the CFA Institute website,
yes.
if you are interested.
As I said, as of the end of September this year, over 1,100 firms are currently notifying us that they are compliant with the Asset Manager Code. Of those 1,100, that includes 39 of the 100 largest asset managers as ranked by assets under management. I would presume that all of those 39 are multinational. So there is a wide understanding within the industry of the value of AMC. The other thing that I said, there is significant support from US-based asset owners. 16 North American pension plan sponsors. So the ones you could imagine, Massachusetts, California, just to name two, but 16 of the North American pension plan sponsors published an open letter in the financial press expressing their support for the Asset Manager Code of Conduct. And they wish to encourage asset managers to comply with this code. So there is clearly good pressure from the investors to move the industry where they would like to see it, which is supporting ethical best practices. And I must say also one of the benefits for firms in Nigeria that wish to adopt the Asset Manager Code is that you will be pushing your industry to a more ethical place. And if your industry can operate in a more ethical place, your clients are going to trust you. You're going to build stronger and longer relationships. And that's key to help the industry in Nigeria develop.
Thank you. And just before we continue, because time is not really our friend, I'd like to also mention the fact that posted in the chat box, we have posted where you can get a list of compliant firms on the CFA Institute website. So you can click on it, look at the list of names. Then we're also going to be posting in the chat box now a form that would like you to fill if you think that CFA Society should provide you with support in getting your executive management to want to adopt this code. We're not going to do the work for you, but what we're going to do is just come and make a presentation and answer their questions and their concerns around the benefits of adopting the code. So if you think that you need support, you've heard it all today, you feel there's one thing you believe your firm should be doing, but you would like somebody external to come and present the case on your behalf, we will be more than willing to do that. So the link has been posted in the chat box. Just click on it and fill it out, just asking for your name, the name of the organization, and who to contact when we want to set up the meeting. There's one question here, which I believe you've also answered previously. It says, is there ever a conflict between the AMC and GIPS? And then it says, when there's a conflict, what then happens?
There is never a conflict. This is the joy of having one group, the Global Industry Standards Group, looking after all of our codes and standards. We can make sure that we're not tripping over each other. And these are very distinct, I was going to say products, but that demeans them. These are very distinct sets of standards and codes for very specific areas. They don't overlap each other because that way would be a waste of resource. They are very specific to address very specific concepts. Performance presentation and how you treat prospective clients is GIPS. and how you treat your existing clients is AMC. So what's common is ethical best practices, always, but addressing very different areas of what we do in asset management.
Thank you very much, Ian. One of the things we in advocacy are going to be pushing for going forward is we're also going to be talking to asset owners and getting them to begin to realize that there are standards that they ought to be demanding. But we felt we should talk to the industry players first. So that's why we're having this workshop, because we actually launched the asset manager code in the market, I think about 6 years ago, but we didn't get much traction. So we need market integrity. We need to begin to get the market to operate for the benefit of the investors. And this is one of the ways by which we can do it. Let's come out and let the market know that we want to serve you with integrity and with fairness in an ethical way. And if you recall Ian's definition of ethics or ethical behavior, which Sonia also mentioned in the last ethical workshop we had, it's unique. It says ethical behavior is doing the right thing when no one is watching, and even if it is right. Because when you're looking at what is legal, we're talking about what is right. So we're saying it's over and above what is right. We're saying what is really for the benefit of those for whom we have fiduciary responsibility. And that's critical. And we need to let the market trust us more, because that's the only way the market will grow at a faster pace. So I'm just saying that to support Ian's push that, see, we have all the resources on the website, and you don't have to be a member to go to the CFA Institute website to download these resources available to the public. So you can go there, you can download what you need, and you can do your checklist. I know a lot of companies that are probably, they have everything, if not everything, they probably have 95%. So all we're asking you to do now is take a look at the checklist and tick off the ones that you have. Look at if you have any gaps, and if you have a gap, put a plan in place to close that gap. And let's begin to see more Nigerian firms, claim compliance. Let me also warn, though, that by the time you start claiming compliance, maybe the regulator may want to confirm that what you have put in place, because CFA institutes won't come and check you. We believe that you will be ethical in claiming compliance, but the regulator may just want to confirm that you are not putting yourself out to be what you are not. So, and we have some regulators in the room today, so they are also learning about this thing. They're also learning what the requirements are, and you can be sure that they will do what they need to do to keep the market going. Yeah, you can continue.
Thank you. Two great points you raised there. A firm does not have to have any affiliation with charter holders or CIPM certificates or anything to do with CFA Institute in order for them to take these resources, these standards, and apply them. We put them out there in order to build market integrity and support, in general, the professional industry of asset management. So no link required for a firm to actually take these resources and implement them and claim compliance. We welcome everybody that wishes to engage with that. The other point that you raised, which is great, you make a claim. You advertise the fact that you are compliant with the Asset Management Code, or indeed the Global Investment Performance Standards, GIPS. Now, from a regulator's perspective, that could be considered an advertisement. And to mislead by making false claims would be wrong. And regulators can very easily detect false claims through saying, okay, it's false advertising. So the integrity of the standard relies upon the actors, the people implementing these, to follow the rules and themselves behave ethically when they are indeed claiming compliance. And regulators can be interested in those claims because they are advertising a certain status for the firms that are making those claims. So yes, thank you, Sade, for raising both of those points.
Okay, so any other questions? If you have questions, you can type into the chat box. If you are not in a position where you can type, you can raise your hand so that we can then ask you to unmute and speak. We just need you to be orderly. We don't want everybody's noise in the background to disturb the others. That's why we muted everyone. So we'd like you to raise your hand so we can then call you to speak. If you are not in a position to type in, because I know some people may not be in a position to type in, maybe they're using their phone or they're, I saw someone in a car, they're on the road but listening in. It's good, it's okay, but you know, we would like to take your questions now before we round up.
Do not take your hands off the wheel.
Please keep your eyes on the road as well. That's going to be very important. It's quiet in the house, but let's just give it a few more minutes because sometimes, depending on data quality, it may not come in on time. Remember, if you need help with making a presentation, maybe to your ESCO, that this is a code we need to take a look at because it will help our business. There's a link in the chat box you can click on and fill a form so that we as CFA Society Nigeria can come and make a presentation to them and get you the benefit of their buy-in, so that the firm can begin to work towards compliance.
One thing I'd like to add as well, Sade, the deck that I've spoken to will be distributed to all the participants. In that deck are my contact details, as long as along with those resource links which I supplied you with. So please, any participants, feel free to reach out to me if you want some additional information as well. I will obviously make sure that CFA Society Nigeria is copied in on that, as they are your dedicated local resource. So those contact details are also going to be on the deck that will be distributed.
Okay, there's a question here now. It says, is the asset manager code relevant to a microfinance institution? Now, the microfinance institution in Nigeria is most often a one branch, very macro savers. They run like a bank, but with limited amount of operations, and their customers are mainly micro savers. So the question is, is the AMC relevant to them?
That's a really good question. I mean, the asset management code is looking at those concepts in asset management that need to be addressed in order for the clients to make sure that their requirements are being met. So the requirements that an investor would have versus the requirements that somebody using a banking service are going to be different. They are going to be different. There are some basic high-level ideas. Communicating, what you should communicate, how you should communicate, putting your client's interests first. These things would all make sense to a banking client versus an asset management client. Trade allocation makes no sense at all to a banking client. So you could look at AMC and say, okay, this we know. I mean, if there isn't a standard that relates to how you should treat banking clients, you could certainly look at AMC and say, well, we don't do this, we don't do that, we don't do that. But these other things, yes, we do. And ensuring that we support our clients' best interests. We could look at some of those ideas and say, okay, let's see what we're doing to address those. You wouldn't claim compliance with AMC because you're not an asset manager, but you could maybe leverage the work that's gone into generating those principle-based concepts in that particular sector as well. Alternatively, find the regulator that looks after retail banking and go and say, hey, we have this standard for asset management and putting investors' interests first. How about we think about doing this for banking clients? And again, it helps market integrity.
Yeah, it does. I would say that for microfinance institution, you should focus more on the statement of investor rights and say that we abide by it, because that covers banking, it covers insurance, it covers most aspects of financial services. Most of the provisions of the asset manager code would not apply
Right.
in your business. So I would save yourself the trouble. But there's a statement of investor rights that if you can take a look at, it's also available on the CFA Institute website, and just make sure you are complying with those statements, and you can brandish it to say that all our customers have this right. You have a right to demand it of us because we stand by it. That would probably help. I have a question here that says that can asset manager code be used in the pension industry without the regulator input? Now, let me put a bit of context for you, Iain, with respect to that. In Nigeria, we have a pension industry where we have a regulator who is standing in like the sponsor for all contributors. So we have the pension funds administrator who are the asset managers. But because individuals contribute in their individual capacity, and you can just imagine the magnitude of the number of people, the regulator now stands in more like, I give the rules, I ensure things are done properly, and like the sponsor, what you would be saying to the trustees for the fund, more or less. So this question is saying, can an individual pension fund administrator adopt AMC without seeking the regulator's approval? I don't know whether you...
I would think yes, partly because making sure that the laws and regulations that are applicable are being followed is part of the asset manager code. So you wouldn't be going against what your regulator is telling you to do because you have to follow what they require as part of being in compliance with AMC. In terms of, I think you'd have to look carefully at the different subsections within AMC to see whether some of those are irrelevant given the structure that you are operating in. But there's no doubt that there are asset owners, and they're typically pension plans, that indeed claim compliance with the asset manager code. There are a number in the US that claim compliance with that code because it is ethical best practices, and they wish to follow those across the board. So I can't see why you would be in conflict with the regulator. You may well find that the regulator applauds the idea that you are adopting a voluntary code that also embraces the fact that you must follow laws and regulations anyway.
Fantastic response, Iain. Thank you so much. Because the asset manager code is an above the board, is ethical principles, I doubt if any regulator would complain about it, because you're actually putting yourself up and out to a higher level of standard than just keeping to regulation. Remember what we said earlier, that it's not just being right. Even if it is right, we're talking about what would you do, right? Even when no one is watching, even if it is right. So a PFA can adopt it and say, hey, I'm AMC compliant. The only thing is, should the regulator check, they need to confirm that all of those things, you're not just saying it for the sake of getting market attention. So, okay, there's someone here that's written the fact that, let me put it this way. Can you just speak to the three codes that have been mentioned today? We have GIPS, we have AMC, and we have the Statement of Investor Rights. The Statement of Investor Rights is not a code. So maybe you just want to clarify that and just speak to it as we round up.
Okay, thank you very much. And one point before I speak to that as well, because you raised this and it's very important. Firms that claim compliance with AMC, they have to have the policies and procedures. They have to be implementing those policies and procedures. It's not just that they have them on a shelf and they're getting dust. It is the way they are running their business. Okay, they're going above and beyond the laws and regulations. They are choosing to adopt these ethical best practices, and they need to be just that, best practices that are being practiced. So they've got the policies and procedures and they are implementing them and updating them, keeping them up to date. The last thing you would wish for is them to be adopted in name alone. It has to be in practice.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
So,
The statement of investor rights is a general set of rights, and if I'm correct, there are 50 rights that investors should be able to claim in any interaction that involves them as an investor participating with the market. It's a very high level set of concepts that is indeed what an investor should expect as their rights as an investor to be able to pursue. Those are not codes or standards. It is just a set of information that any investor should be able to live by. We then have the Asset Manager Code, which is a principle-based code, which is basically the undertaking between an asset manager and their particular clients, and how those interactions between those two parties should be conducted in a way that puts the interests of the investor first. It's easy enough for a firm to take an investor's money and then do whatever the firm wants to do with it. And then once they've got the money, the investor is ignored. No, you put the investor first. That is the professional way that the industry wishes to act. And the Asset Manager Code addresses that. Now, GIPS, Global Investment Performance Standards, is about the calculation and the presentation of performance information specifically to prospective clients. Okay, so we are all bombarded with performance information that maybe says, in the last 5 years, we have managed to grow 60% annually. And then in tiny little print somewhere, there are some exceptions as to what was done and how this was incorporated or annualized over whatever. So it's totally misleading. GIPS is all about ensuring there is a standard set of information, minimum set of information that is presented to every prospective client, so they are not misled by the claims being made by an asset manager. So GIPS is all about performance presentation to prospective clients. AMC is all about the treatment of investors by asset managers. And the Statement of Investors' Rights is a broad concept that everybody involved in the investment industry should be able to look at and say, okay, as an investor, this is what I can expect from operatives in the industry.
thank you very much, Anne. And I must say that we've had a good time with you, and we're excited about what is going to be happening in our market from today's workshop. So we'd like to say a very big thank you to you for having helped us to understand the Asset Manager Code a lot more, and also giving us the roadmap, should I say direction, as to where to get the assistance that we need, should we want to implement. So I would like to close here by saying a very big thank you to every one of you on this call, and to also remind you of our society's events that are still coming up later on this month. We have the career fair on the 29th and 30th of October. It's going to be virtual. So if you want to learn how to position yourself in order to advance your career, I would advise you to please join. So 29th and 30th, that's Thursday and Friday, is a career fair. And on Saturday is our advocacy committee's day. We're going to be having the very first industry practitioners ethics challenge. The finals will be on Saturday, 31st of October. So we'd like you to attend. You don't have to be a member to have been part of that industry practitioners ethics challenge. It was open to anybody that is a practitioner in the industry. The only condition is that you are working in the investment management industry. So come and watch your colleagues. They are competing in their individual capacity. They've been formed into teams. We balloted them into teams. It was a random number generator that put them. So it will be fun because it will be good to begin to put these things into practice. So that's on Saturday, and we're hoping we'll have all of you in attendance, and we'll all have fun together. We have to build this market together in order that it becomes, we show a lot more market integrity in the way and manner things are done. So once again, I want to thank everyone, members of the trustworthy subcommittee of the advocacy committee put this together. So I want to say thank you very much to Paula and her team. And I want to say thank you very much to the society staff who have been giving us the technical support. And lastly, I want to thank every one of you that stayed from the beginning to the very end. I am sure that we will all make this market what we desire it to be if we keep working at it. So thank you and have a very lovely evening. Continue to stay safe. The pandemic is not all gone, so let's still continue to stay safe and protect ourselves, and we will all overcome it at the end of the day. Iain, a very big thank you and welcome to Nigeria.
Thank you very much. A pleasure to be with you. An absolute pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Paula is saying thank you. She joined late, so she's here now. She's